Hey listeners, it's Jen. Welcome back to Season 7 of What Are You Listening To? I hope that you're enjoying Season 7 so far, and I honestly can't believe that it is already November. However, we have more super fan episodes, exciting guests, and of course, some holiday mixes still coming your way on this season. And if you haven't listened yet, please check out this season of The Battle. Matt Sidholm and I are looking to place the captain's hat on one yacht rock song that rules them all. We're already to the semifinal round, so be sure to get caught up on that show before we announce the winner. Okay, that's all the announcements I have, so let's get into it. For this week's show, I'm doing another time capsule episode. And for those of you that haven't listened to a WAYLT time capsule episode yet, it's exactly what it sounds like. Time capsule episodes consist of bits and pieces, thoughts and emotions in the form of songs that are meant to evoke a certain time, place, or life phase. I'm going to bring you a 4-song playlist like always, but time capsule episodes are not interview style. They're simply meant to create a vibe or mark an audio moment in time. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. For this time capsule, I'm doing an album review. For those of you that are loyal listeners of the show, you know that there are 2 albums that I have been extremely excited about and anxiously awaiting in 2025. One of them was Taylor Swift's Life of a Showgirl, and the second is Florence and the Machine's Everybody Scream. As always, I had fellow Swiftie and friend of the show, Heather Garner, join me to discuss Life of a Showgirl. And normally I'd have Sam from the Super Awesome Mix podcast here to join me for this album review, since he is as big a Florence fan as I am. But since he is in the throes of new fatherhood, I'm going to have to go it alone and hopefully make Sam proud. So for this week's time capsule, I'm going to walk you through Florence and the Machine's 6th studio album called Everybody Scream, which dropped on Halloween. I'll share my 4 favorite tracks via the playlist and also share some interesting facts about the process of making the album, some life events that inspired the songs, and the stories behind some of the music. Which songs made the cut? You're about to find out. And as you listen, if any of these songs are new to you, don't worry. I'll publish a playlist with the episode so you don't miss a beat. All right, let's get going. I think it's fair to start with a quick herstory of the band. Florence and the Machine are an English indie rock band. They formed in London in 2007, and they're fronted by lead vocalist Florence Welch. I think it's also worth noting that keyboardist Isabella Summers, guitarist Rob Aykroyd, drummer Christopher Lloyd Hayden, and harpist Tom Monger are also original founding members of the band, and they're all still with her except for drummer Christopher Lloyd Hayden. He left the band in 2018, just before the release of their 4th studio album, an album called High as Hope. Their debut album was an album called Lungs that came out in July of 2009. And of course, we were all introduced via the song Dog Days Are Over. I think that was probably most of us. That was the first time that we heard Florence Welch was on that track. That song just, I think, launched her overnight. It was such a huge hit. And then that album, Lungs, was followed up by their 2nd studio album called Ceremonials, which also lent us the amazing hit Shake It Out. I love that song, and I think that's probably what solidified my love of Florence and the Machine, was the Ceremonials album and the song Shake It Out. That album came out in 2011, and then their 3rd studio album, How Big, How Blue, How Beautiful, which is one of my favorites, came out in 2015, and that featured probably my favorite Florence song, which is a song called Ship to Wreck. Then her 4th album, High as Hope, came out in 2018. That featured a song called Hunger that's fantastic. Dance Fever came out in 2022, and I love that album. There are so many great ones on that album. King, Morning Elvis, Free, Dream Girl Evil, so good. And now we have Everybody Scream, which, as I mentioned in the intro, released on Halloween Day. I think that the songs, these last two albums, are really closely related. So I will say, if you like Dance Fever, I think you're really going to like Everybody Scream. So run to check it out. And if you are just discovering Everybody Scream and you like it, I think you'll really like Dance Fever. So maybe do a reverse order listen and go back and check out Dance Fever if you're really loving Everybody Scream. Now, speaking about Everybody Scream, we're about to get into some pretty heavy material. According to Florence Welch, this album is a cathartic exploration of trauma, healing, and the demands of performance, heavily influenced by her life-threatening ectopic pregnancy and emergency surgery in 2023. The album uses imagery of mysticism, witchcraft, and folk horror to explore themes of womanhood, the limits of the body, and the conflict between ambition and family life. So I think we're about to go deep and we are going on a journey. This album definitely does feel like a journey. So let's get into it. We are going to talk about my very first playlist pick and the title track on the album to kick us off, the song Everybody Scream. Now, I featured this song on the New Music Mix, I think probably on the maybe the September New Music Mix over on Super Awesome Mix. But I also had to bring it to What Are You Listening To? I love this song. I think it's such a great example of why people love Florence and the Machine, and also why people love her live show. I mean, she hasn't even done one tour date yet that I know of for this album. And everybody I've spoken to that's a fan, like, this is the song everyone wants to see live. There are so many great ones on this album that I'll be excited about. I know this tour will be fantastic, but this song specifically, I cannot wait to see her perform it live. Another cool thing about this song is that it's co-written with Mitski and Mark Bowen of Idols. And I love that you can kind of hear, especially that Mitski influence. I really do hear that in this song. You know, I think Florence Welch is such a strong presence and she has such a unique voice that it's obvious when she's collaborating with someone else. I feel like more than any other time her presence is known, even when she's working with really strong artists who have a very strong point of view. Like, initially what comes to mind is like Hey Girl, her collab with Lady Gaga, and Florida, her collab with Taylor Swift. I feel like those are artists that, have a very unique voice on their own. Yet when Florence joins those songs, you really feel her influence in the music. It doesn't feel like just a Lady Gaga song anymore or just a Taylor Swift song anymore. And I think that's just a testament to how powerful her voice is. So I love that she's written the song with Mitski, or co-written it with Mitski and Mark Bowen, and that you hear those influences, because I think she is so powerful that it's almost hard to outpower or outshine her influence. But I do hear Mitski in this song, and I love that. Again, I've mentioned it before. You'll probably hear me say it throughout this episode, but truly her live show is a magical, cathartic experience. And if you have not seen her live, you have to. Really, of all, I see a lot of live music. I love live music, and she is one of my favorite performers live, hands down. And I also think too, like, this song could only be the opening track of the album. I think it does such a great job of setting you up for what you're about to experience with the album as a whole. And I think that she's just so honest and vulnerable, as always. I think that she's really open with her relationship to fame, her relationship with her body and herself, her relationship with her power. And this song, I think, explores all of that. She has this great line where she says, "How can I leave you when you're screaming my name?" And I think, again, I'm going back to Taylor Swift here, but I think this is such a common theme right now. I feel like we've seen it with Chappell Roan, we've seen it with Sabrina Carpenter, we've seen it with Taylor Swift, we're seeing it with Florence now. Like, some of these really giant artists who are just longing for a normal life and speaking really frankly about the good and bad of fame. I think there was this era, this sort of golden era, where there wasn't such a thing as the paparazzi, or at least they operated within bounds. There were rules, seemingly like unwritten rules, and then it kind of went off the rails. And then celebrities were sort of seen as whining and crybaby if they complained about, sort of these trappings of fame and just the lack of privacy and not being able to have a life that they feel like they own because of the paparazzi, and kind of receiving a lot of backlash. I think we as the public were like, oh, wah, cry me a river, you're rich and famous. And now it's kind of coming full circle where we're giving these artists space to say, look, like, yeah, it's great. There are so many amazing things that I can't tell you about. Like I can't explain what it's like to stand in front of a crowd of thousands of people that are chanting for you to play just one more song. Or I think, Wish List, the Taylor Swift song off of her new album, comes to mind, where she's talking about how, we ask the world to leave us alone and they do. And she's dreaming about a driveway with a basketball hoop, like these very simple things that they just don't really have access to anymore. When you've reached a certain level of fame, I just think that those kinds of things slip away from you. And I love that we as listeners and we as fans are now sort of giving artists space to feel that way, that both can be true. You can want fame, you can have fame, you can love fame, and it can also be really taxing. It can also be really confusing. It can also really be hard on you physically and emotionally. And I just like that we are now giving artists space to say those kinds of things. It makes me feel like the relationship, and I'm air quoting relationship with the artist, is a lot more of a two-way street. It feels like they're letting it, specifically around Florence, it feels like she's letting us in on something that most of us are never going to experience. And she's really vulnerable. She's really open, and she's really frank about the good and the bad that comes with that. I think that she delivers the same level of honesty and disdain in this album that we saw feature really prominently in Dance Fever, and maybe even, ramps it up a little bit for this album. I think also, too, another interesting thing about this song and the album as a whole is that it would be really easy for her to come off as like crazy or hysterical, but she doesn't. To me, she really comes off as powerful. I think about like an Alanis Morissette, and when Jagged Little Pill came out and the song You Ought to Know, like everybody was like, oh, it's so, it's just so raw, it's so rough. And I think it did. She's one of the first that I remember. I mean, of course, like you had Madonna, you had artists that came before that allowed these women to be as powerful and blunt as they were then and continue to be. But I think we also struggled with it a little, right? It was the first time women were coming out saying these really progressive things that I think we'd all been thinking for a while, but finally said out loud. I also think about Carrie Underwood's Before He Cheats, where, that kind of comes off as unhinged or bitter or whiny. And I think, Florence just comes across as powerful. Again, I'm not dissing the Alanis song or the Carrie Underwood song at all. I think that, they are precursors to what Florence is doing here. I just think that she has nailed this vulnerable, powerful female space. And when she speaks from it, it comes across as only powerful to me, not unhinged or crazy. And so I do love that about this song. I think it would be easy for a song that has this much going on, and an album, quite frankly, that has this much going on, to go off the rails and, easily fall into hysterical territory. And this does not. And if it does, if she lets it go into sort of chaos mode for a moment on the album, I feel like she quickly brings it back, or she's doing it to sort of lead us down this path, and then take us to a place where we're seeing something unexpected, or we're finding a lesson that maybe we hadn't learned prior. And I do think that this album is filled with lessons. So again, another a great praise for the title track. I can't say enough strong things about the album, and again, the title track, Everybody Scream. Love it. The album then goes into a song called One of the Greats. Give this one a listen. I featured this one on the October new music mix of Super Awesome Mix. And I think that this one is just another really reflective look at fame and what it takes to succeed, especially as women. The other cool thing about this song that I think makes it worth listening to is Welch said that this song was originally written as a long poem, and then she recorded it in one take, which she sang straight from the page. So when you listen to One of the Greats, just picture that, right? Like she's holding this piece of paper of this poem that she wrote and just one take sang it, and there it is for us to hear. Insane. Next track is a song called Witch Dance. This is another favorite on the album. I'm really looking forward to seeing this one live. Also, it's super sexy. It's like a vampire movie. There's also this great, like almost spoken word section that reads like a poem. So I think that's definitely a cool track as well. But for number two, for even though it's track 4 on the album, the number 2 track on our playlist this week, my focus tracks off of the new album, is my favorite song on the album. And you've got to imagine what I'm getting ready to say since I gave such high praise to the song Everybody Screams. But my second focus track is track 4 on the album, and it is a song called Sympathy Magic. I love this song. It's beautiful musically, and then you pair it with her vocals, and it makes this my favorite track on the album. And it's a toss up again. I really do love Everybody Scream. And I think that one is so quintessential Florence and the Machine. This one, it just has all of the best pieces of what I love about what she does. She has this great line where she says, chewing on a feeling and spitting it out. The lyric doesn't really lead anywhere else beyond that. I just think that that's such a powerful thing to think about and say. And it's something that I've actively engaged like in a almost daily practice since I heard it, like, especially feelings that I'm like, oh, why am I feeling this way? I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to chew on it for a second and then spit it out and be done with it. Like, I feel like every one of her songs has a pearl of wisdom in it like that, especially on this album. And then she has another line a little bit later on in the song where she says, I no longer try to be good. It didn't keep me safe like you told me that it would. And I think that one has got to hit hard for especially a lot of the females out there. You know, we women of a certain age, I think, spent our whole lives, you know, being told to be smaller and be quiet and not be so loud and not have so many opinions. And I just love it that she's like, yep, I'm not going to do that. You told me to behave that way. I tried it and it didn't keep me safe. It didn't do me any good. And I love that she just is blatantly calling that out for all of us to hear. I think it's something that we all need to hear. And I don't think that means like, okay, I no longer try to be good, so I'm trying to be bad. It just means that like we get to define what being good is, air quote, whether that means being good by following the rules, or being good by excelling at our job, or being good by being the best parent, or being good because we're so, you know, dedicated to our friends and family. Like, there are all kinds of things that we can do. But I like that she sort of takes this and says she's going to define it. It's not, I no longer try to be good in the way that society defines good. Again, I'm air quoting. And I think that we find that it does serve her well. You know, it does serve her well. And she does find safety in just living authentically rather than trying to stay inside this box that people want her to fit in. So just listen to this song with the lyrics on, because then I won't have to read them all to you. There are so many great lyrics in this song. So definitely, I think she has such a keen insight. And I think if you only listen to one song on this album, if you're on the fence and you're like, Florence is sort of hit or miss for me. I loved the Ceremonials album, but didn't like High as Hope. I don't know. I say, listen to this song. I think you'll like it, and I think it'll make you want to listen to the full album. Also, too, the buildup in this song pays off in a major way. Florence, again, is so good at sort of taking you on this journey, and you just sort of follow wherever she leads you. And I think that this one has such a great payoff. I love this track. As we move on, not a focus track, but the next track on the album is a song called Perfume and Milk. This is an interesting, dark song. You know, there's a great lyric in this one that says, miracles are often inconvenient and a prayer is a spell. I love that. I mean, again, this is a person who is paying attention to life, right? A deep seeker. And she shares that with us as listeners. And again, I think that it's like she trusts us to be able to handle these deep and sometimes dark thoughts and still love her. And I don't know if that's, again, another reason that her fans are so loyal. I think that Taylor Swift fans are so loyal because they find her so relatable. And I feel like Florence and the Machine fans are super loyal because it's almost like she asks us to be, right? Like she invites us in by being so vulnerable and so honest and giving us some things to explore and chew on, that you almost feel like you're taking care of her as almost as much as she's taking care of us by being a fan. It feels like a very reciprocal relationship, I think. And that's something unique about Florence and the Machine, and I think fans of their music, is that we almost feel this responsibility to, sort of hold these lyrics and hold these deep, almost secret feelings that she's sharing with us, and then sing them back to her and share them back with her at a live show, even though we know and she's really open about how taxing those live shows and performing can be. So it really is, it feels like this very reciprocal relationship, at least for me, that I have with these songs. And so that's another reason that I love her and that I feel like I'm a loyal fan and will be for a long time to come. All right, my next focus track is a song called Buckle. This song is really interesting because, as powerful as she also shows us a super vulnerable side. And I love the double meaning in the title of this song. She talks about how her resolve buckles when she sees this person, and that she's also hanging off the buckle of his belt, right? Like she just can't shake him. She tells us about how this guy left her crying on the floor, how he made her doubt herself, how she feels like she's too old to still be feeling this way at all. I mean, like this all feels so deeply personal. And like I was just saying before, I think that's part of her appeal. She says the things out loud that most of us keep in our heads. And because she trusts us to hear those and be able to handle it, I think we have a really unique relationship with her and her songs. And the other thing too is like this song does not necessarily have a happy ending. She makes it okay to feel this way. And again, another thing that I love mixed in with all of this power that she projects is this raw honesty. And maybe that's exactly where the power comes from, is this place of vulnerable honesty. And so that's something that I continue to think about as I listen to this album as well. We then move on to a song called Kraken. This is a really cool story song. And the way she tells the story is very cool. So definitely check out Kraken, as you're, again, not on the playlist, but definitely a song worth checking out on the album. And then to bring us home and sort of round out the last few tracks of the album, my final focus track is a song called The Old Religion. Again, this one's delivering some super hard truths in the most beautiful way possible. She has a line in this song where she says, "I am wound so tightly, I hardly even breathe." And I love that line in particular because it's so conscious, right? It's like she's choosing not to breathe as a way to conserve internal resources. Do you know what I mean? It's not saying I'm wound so tightly that I can't breathe or that it's hard to breathe. The way she phrases it, and I know it's intentional, is that she's choosing, that to not breathe because she has to maintain some sort of control or, you know, some ability to conserve her internal resources. So again, it's like these nuanced phrasings or lyrics that she drops that I think are so thoughtful, and you can tell it's something that she's chewed on and she's mulled over herself so many times. So I love that lyric. I also too like the lyric where she says, "I'm not afraid. Oh, don't let it find me. But you can't outrun yourself, you'll see." Like, so she's, again, we're getting both sides. It's almost like she's talking out of both sides of her mouth. But I think instead of feeling that way, I feel like she's trying to make space for both things to be true, right? She's not afraid, but don't let this thing find me. And by the way, you can't outrun you can't outrun yourself, right? Like you're gonna get to it anyway, but it's gonna it likely will be scary, right? Once you confront this thing that you don't want to look at. And so I just think that, again, she's a master at bringing you in and taking you down this path and making you think about things that are maybe, uncomfortable things to think about. And I also think that this song feels so timely and so now. She has a line in there where she says, "You wonder why we're hungry for some kind of release." to me, this just speaks to the powder keg environment that we're creating with one another right now. Like some kind of pressure release has to happen, or it feels like it's all going to explode. So I think this song just hits hard given the times. I think that this is also another thing that I love about this song is that it explores like old story versus new story. I think she's calling it old religion to give it weight, and to ask some of us perhaps to reflect on some of these old stories that we're telling ourselves, right? We're holding on to these old stories about ourselves like they're religion, and they're just not. I think that's something, especially as I've gotten older, that I really try and reflect on as I'm having, a feeling or something feels uncomfortable or crunchy. I try and think about it like, why am I doing this? Am I doing it because it's something I've always done, or am I doing it because it's something that's going to serve me well, and contribute to the greater good? And I think we all fall into these patterns of just like, these are rote, this is how we do it, rather than evaluating if that pattern still serves us. So this song really is a reminder for that. And I love it for that. I think that's such a good thing to do at multiple times in your life. Evaluate the stories that you're telling yourself and decide, like, is this still true? Does this still resonate, or no? This is an old story. So again, I love this song. Use this song as your meditation or your guide as you are thinking about old stories versus new stories about yourself, and the people around you. I also, too, last thing I'll say about this track before we sort of round out the other songs that complete the album. I love that she's not afraid to talk about some of these subjects too that are, traditionally have been thought of as perhaps taboo, like religion, the patriarchy, feminine power, and vulnerability. Again, she's so thoughtful and reflective that it doesn't look like she's looking for just like a vibe, like viral or memeable material. She's really wrestling with these questions herself, and maybe on like an existential level. And I love that she lets us in on that self-reflection process, because I think it helps me, it forces me to kind of go through that same self-reflection. Then, as we're rounding out the album, again, I've sort of pulled my four favorites for you, but the rest of the album still has some strong tracks on it. There's a song called "Drink Deep" that comes right after "The Old Religion." It's haunting. It's a spooky, introspective story song. Definitely a thinker. So give that one a listen. "Music by Men." This was another close favorite for me in terms of I think if I had put five songs on the favorites list, this song probably would have been the fifth. It's so honest and raw about a relationship going south and sort of the self and couples reflection that comes with that. I think that she does, again, such a good job at not only reflecting on the situation but her part in it. And I think "Music by Men" is a good example of that. We also have "You Can Have It All." That is the second to last track. Again, she's such a great storyteller. She knows how to deliver a crescendo like no other. She has a line in this song that says, "Dug a hole in the garden and buried a scream." Now, I'm not going to tell you what grew from that. You're going to have to listen to this song to learn what grew. But that is great storytelling, right? That's one lyric that I just had never heard that before. Dug a hole in the garden and buried a scream. And it begs the question, right? Like, oh, well, what grew if you buried a scream? Anything? Nothing? So again, I think that just speaks to her genius as a storyteller. So listen to the song "You Can Have It All" and learn what grows when you bury a scream in the garden. And then the album closes out with a sweet, thoughtful song called "End Love," which is like a parting hug for this album. It takes you through it. You go on the journey with her. And I feel like this is such a nice palate cleanser of an ending. She has the mantra, "Peace is coming," said over and over throughout the song, accompanied by a harp. And even though the album's preceding themes of struggle make it feel a little bit hard, or I think you're a little bit skeptical of the promise that peace is coming, but I still leave the album feeling hopeful and inspired by the power of humans, and especially female resilience. I just think like this is a great way to end it. perfect chef's kiss on the album. So definitely give that last track a listen. I would say that. Listen to Sympathy Magic, listen to Everybody Scream, listen to this closing track. Sympathy Magic, opener, closer. And if you're not in after those 3 tracks, maybe this album isn't for you, but I think that that is a great way to approach it if you're new to Florence and the Machine. If you're a fan, if you love Dance Fever, I think you're just going to jump right into this album and it's going to flow seamlessly for you. As, like I said, kind of I don't even want to say a follow-up to Dance Fever, but like almost a part 2. So I love it for that too. But hopefully, the main takeaway from the episode is that this album is for sure worth a listen. It is a cohesive vision that delivers on all the things I love about Florence and the Machine. You get the drama, you get the cinema, you get the deep lyrics, you get the empowerment. So for sure, check it out and let me know what you think about the new album. I always love reading all the lovely comments and feedback. Even the snarky ones are sometimes funny. So definitely keep it coming at Jenn1020 on Instagram. That's JENNJENN 1020. Or you can also email me at jen@superawesomemix.com. That's JENN@superawesomemix.com. And as always, be sure to follow, download, and share this show. And if you love listening, please share it with a friend that you think might enjoy listening to. Last but not least, to stay informed on all things Super Awesome Mix and What Are You Listening To, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Super Awesome Mix. Thanks again for listening, and please join me again next week to find your new favorite song.